All right, Mr. Tolly, it is all yours.
Well, thank you. I got a couple things I'm going to donate for your drawing. I guess you call them drawing. There's some sandpaper that I'll be using, not that, but later. And this is a tool from Hunter, a #1 tool. And that is what I'll be using later. What I'm going to be talking about tonight is making spin tops for toys for kids of all ages. And trust me, they're a lot of fun. I've made probably, and I'm not exaggerating, would you say close to 1,000 probably? At one of the craft fairs, I took 200 of them and they was gone. I think I've saturated the market in Dripping Springs area. But one of the things, how many has never messed with epoxy? I'm calling it mess because epoxy gets messy. How many's never done anything with epoxy? Epoxy. Other than gluing your fingers together? So everybody else has used epoxy then. Well, we can go home. Yeah, we can go home. But I found out I was making spin tops. I was making spin tops and putting in my beads of curried boxes so the kids in the cancer area would have a toy to play with. Well, right now, Dell Children's in Austin is not accepting beads of curried boxes because one year, I think it was the year before last, we gave them 343 boxes. And they stuck them everywhere, and they still got a bunch of them. So then I thought, well, I'm making a bunch of them. I'll take them and sell some. And they sell really good. So I've got some figures here I'll go over really quick. Now, I slice them about a 1/2 inch thick, and I'll show you that in a little bit. But there's a 2-quart, let's see, can you see that? The 2-quart, and there's a couple different brands. One is Aluminite Clear, and the other is Pour On Epoxy. Now, they're $38, and this was $35. But I can get 12 spin tops out of each bottle. I'm going to show you how to cut the bottle in a little bit. So that comes up to, let me read this, 2 quarts at $38 divided by 24 because I can get both of them, because you can get a full quart out of both of them. That's $1.60 per top. I sell them for $5. And guess who buys most of them? Grandparents. They buy them for their grandkids. So at Hobby Lobby, they had this on sale last year for $11.99 for the 2-part. I bought as much as I could get. And that comes up to about 50 cents per spin top. Because the dowel I buy is 4 foot long and it's about a penny and a half. So at Lowe's, I can get a 48-inch 7/16 dowel. The reason you want to have 7/16 is when you turn it, and I'll show you that in a little bit, if you need to be able to have enough to turn some of the dowel away to curve into it. So then divided by, I use about 3.75 inches of the dowel. I get 12 dowels out of one 48-inch piece. That's 18 cents a dowel. So Ace Hardware at $1.60 plus 18 cents, $1.78 per spin top. With the sale, it comes up 50 cents plus the 18 cents is 68 cents a pin top, and I'm selling them for $5. And they go like crazy. But you know, one day, and what was it, 2 weeks ago, we had a farmer's market in Dripping Springs. All of us, I sold 3 spin tops. So it was kind of a bad day, if you will, at the market. So any question on that? Now, one of the things that you need to do is read the instructions in the box. I mean, how many don't read? Yeah, it gets you in trouble. But it comes with the instruction sheet, and it takes a good time, not a lot, but read the instructions. Because what happens, and I'll pass this around, I'll throw it at him, but Chuck would get it, that this is what happens when you don't actually follow the directions. Now, actually, that is like rubber. And I know I mixed up part A and part B exactly. I don't know what happened. Now, one of the things that I do is when I get the epoxy, it comes in part A and part B. I always mark, let's see, I always mark the lid part A. I don't normally mark part B. Why is that? True. But one day I opened up both bottles. I poured a part A and part B, and then I turned around and put part A and B lids on backwards. Needless to say, I had to use a pair of pliers to get the lid off. So now I always mark the lid part A. The reason is part A is thicker than part B. I don't know why that is, but I pour in part B, and I use these cups right here. No, not those cups. We had them here earlier. Oh, right. No, that's not them. But anyway, I marked the little cups that I use, part A and part B also. Where'd they go? Did somebody use the cups? No. This is next thing I'm going to talk about. Where's the little cup? Underneath your box. Oh! I'll get rid of the boxes right now. So, these little cups, I don't remember where I got them, but I marked one part A. I see. We can see that. I don't see that part A. There. Then I pour part A, and I'll just figure out where it is, and then I'll pour part B to where it's the equal height. I don't fill the little cups up all the way. You can, and when I'm doing something a little bit later, I know to fill them up to 2 ounces. And I'll explain that when I get to it. So, part A and part B. Now, I found out that once the part A and part B jars get empty, sometimes they go wonky, like this. Why, I don't know. So when you try to pour the epoxy in, you get wonky pours. So I was driving to Austin one day, and I saw this piece of EMT laying alongside the road. So I swung back around, picked it up. It was about 4 feet long. This is the gray electric EMT conduit. And I found out that Amazing Clear Cast is a little bit different size jar than the bar top epoxy. So I chucked this up in the lathe, turned just a little bit out of the inside, and now when those jars are wonky, I put this on there, and I might put some rubber bands here once I start filling this thing up. And because the epoxy gets hot, the jar comes, I'm going to say, unwonky. It will fill up inside it here, so when you get ready to turn it, you have a cylinder instead of a squishy, wonky chunk of epoxy. Wonky. My first thought was, I took a piece of, I think it's pecan, and I turned it, and I used that for like 3 or 4 months until I was driving down the road, and since I'm frugal, I stopped and got the other. Cheap. Frugal's cheap. So the other, is Hobby Lobby. That's Hobby Lobby. Maybe I didn't bring, I think these are all Hobby Lobby ones. I might not have brought any that says the other. So, any questions on marking your jars and how to keep them from going wonky? Now, Eugene Soto, he makes a lot of pen blanks. I think he's still doing that. Is that correct? And he's probably demonstrated here. Now, does he use epoxy or does he use acrylics? Aluminite. Okay. That's one of the things, because if you get some, what was it? If you get the mixed up, when you start turning it, you got one that's really hard and the other soft. So it's best to use the same thing. So let's see, where am I at? Now, oh, here. Because these are some rounds from Eugene Soto. I bought a bunch of these from him one time at SWAT, and he wasn't there last year. And I found out the same thing here. I put just a little bit of epoxy in the bottom because the bottom is concave. And that way when I put these in, they set flat. Otherwise, they curve a little bit. So that's another thing that you can do is put rounds in your bottle. And I actually made some molds, and I'll pass this around. This is actually 3/4 inch PVC pipe. And you see I cut it in half and then pour the epoxy in. I tape the bottom up, pour the epoxy in, and then when it's done I take the tape off, open it up, and where the little seam is I just use a sheetrock knife or utility knife and scrape the seam off. And that leaves rounds that you can put in the jar like that. So I'm trying to give you some different ideas what to do with epoxy. Let's see. Which one did I open? So I'll pass this around. You can look at Eugene Soto's. I was hoping he'd be here so I could give him credit for that. I did those and it didn't make much difference. Now one of the things when you get the box of a this is crystal clear cast, it comes with these really little cups, and there's usually 2 or 3 of them in there. I find out that they're not quite what I want, but I keep them because I'm frugal. That's cheap. So there again, these are brand new jars, and there's instructions, and there's a little stir stick inside, and I'll show you how to use those in a little bit. So here again, hello. Since I'm starting, this is part A right here. I want to mark this as part A. That way I hope I won't glue the cap back on. Anybody do that? It's never easy to do. Okay. So, let me get my... Nope. Now I'm going to open these bottles up, and do we have a trash can here? I have to be careful. I don't want to knock these over.
There's your trash can.
Okay. I know I could have opened these up at home, but you know, this is a part of the deal. Now, yeah, that's right. Now I'll show you. See this part B bottle? It's wonky. So when it's empty, it's still going to be wonky. That's why I use that EMT, or you can use wood to turn it around. So since I know that part A is thicker, I look at my jar and get part A, and then I'll just pour some in. See how thick that stuff is?
And what temperature should it be at least?
Like I said before, what did I say?
Read the instructions.
Ideally, your epoxy should be between 68 and 85 degrees. That way it's more Fahrenheit. Now, Bronny makes these little paper towels now that folds in half so you can get 2 pieces out. And you're going to need a lot of this stuff. So since I put those little things down there, I want to wipe that up. So now then, part A, I'll take part B, and I'll pour in the same amount. Eyeball it. I'm not weighing it, just eyeball it. Now this is why it's really important to read directions, because System 3, has anybody used System 3? It's what, 1/3, 2/3 or something like that? Well, they do make 1-to-1, but they used to make 3-to-1. That was a pain in the neck to use. But this is 50-50, part A and part B. So, now, one of the things that you can do is keep all kind of little pill bottles and juice bottles and stuff like that. There's all kind of sizes. So, I also found out that it's best to use a heat gun. Now, part A, like I say, is thicker, and I mix that in these little yogurt cups. Now, I took the label off of this so we can see it a little bit better. So I use a heat gun, and if it's a little chilly in your studio, use a heat gun, heat the epoxy just a little bit, and it'll run out a lot better. It makes it flow. And if you get too hot, these little plastic cups will melt. How do I know that? They went wonky on me too. So then I let it drain. No. Until it gets most of it out of there. And that's where the little paper towels come in handy. After it drips, you know, you can wait too long. I'll wipe that off. And then I'll put these in a little baggie to take them home, because I really like these cups and they're kind of hard to find. And then part B, it's thinner. See how easy it pours? But I'll still use the heat gun and heat it up a little bit and let it drip in there. This here, read the directions. Yeah, you can mix it for about 20, I mean, it'll stay gelled for 20, 30 minutes. It also depends on the temperature and humidity. Now, one of the instructions says to stir it continually until you don't see any lines in it. I don't know if we can see that here tonight or not. Come on, drip, drip, drip. Where's those plastic bags? Okay. No. The little, I had bags to put those in to keep them separated. So this is one of those stir sticks. One of the important things, you want to cut the end of it off where it's flat. That way you can get all the way down in. Oh, and you need to stir this for, like, it says 2 to 6 minutes. So I set my clock on my phone to 2 minutes and, I don't know if we can see that or not, 2 minutes and 12 seconds. It takes me a few seconds to pick up the silly stick and get stirring. So then I'll put that in there and I'll hit start. Now, stir, 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 stir. How long do you think 2 minutes and 12 seconds is? It's forever. And I'm wondering, before I read the real instructions, that piece I passed around a few minutes ago, maybe I didn't stir it long enough. Yeah. And now I have a little flat mold I used to make pen blanks with. And that one was the one I started. But I pour a layer in there of one color with mica powder. And then after that sets up pretty solid, maybe 2 or 3 hours, then I'll mix up another batch with a different color and pour it on top. And then after I got roughly 3/4 inch and there's like 4 or 5 different colors, then I sliced it on the bandsaw and put that down in jars and made spin tops with it. Now I'm at 1 minute and 6 seconds. Now you probably can't see, but I'm getting a lot of air bubbles in there, and you can see it's mixing together. If you look at it, there's little lines in there that goes together and stuff like that. 48 seconds, 46. And one of the things you can do is rake your little stir stick on the side and go back and forth to get all of that mixed up really good. I haven't had an issue since I've done it this way. So somebody I know sitting in a corner had to read directions because he didn't believe me. I mean, he didn't believe the length of time. I know how long 2 minutes is. Time it. So, and then you can look at it and you can see that it's really mixed up really good. And the warmer the temperature is, the better it mixes. So then I cancel it. And that was 2 minutes, 12 seconds. You can mix it for 3 minutes and whatever. Now, one of the things, because I stirred this a lot, I got air bubbles in it. Now, one of the things I like to do is take the stir stick and put over in another cup. Then the heat gun, you can use a torch. A torch in a wood turning studio is not the best in the world. So then I'll take this and I'll pop those bubbles and pour it into the next jar really slow. It won't get all of the bubbles, but it pops most of them. And when your fingers get hot, you know that you're getting pretty good there. Yeah. Yes, I turn the heat gun on as I start pouring. And then as it's pouring in there, I will flash the epoxy, which pops those bubbles. Now then, there's so many different colors of a mica powder that you can get. I'll pass this around after I show it here. DB, oh, y'all know who DB is, right? Dearly beloved. She bought this box for me because I was wanting some epoxies one time. Oop. And reason I turn them upside down, if they're in this way, you can't tell what they are. So I turn them upside down. Did you get it, bud? Now can you get up? Yeah. So this is a box of multicolors. And the reason I turn them upside down is because I'm making the spin tops. I don't want to use the same color over and over and over and over. So this way I can make all kind of different colors. So pass that around. If it dumps out on the floor, no big deal. So
And do any of you have a color wheel? If you want to make different colors, you can mix 2 or 3 colors.
yeah, you can do that. So then one of the other things, I have this overhead. This is gold mica powder. Remember I said gold and I waited a little bit? It's just mica powder. So here you can go to HEB and get these little spoons, which is a tad, a drop, a smidgen, a pinch, and a dash. One of the reasons these are very handy, if you measure out your epoxy about the same every time, and you use this little spoon, whichever one you want, and you dip up the mica powder, and you get it about the same, then each time you put that in your epoxy, you're going to have basically the same consistency. Now that works really good if you're using a epoxy on a mesquite bowl or a pecan bowl and want to fill those bug holes or cracks. I demonstrated a couple, 3 years ago how to put bow ties in. Has anybody been using those? It's just another avenue that ties that crack together. So I'll pass that around and I'll be looking for the gold to come back. So then again, what I do is I mix this. I try to get over here. Then I'll mix the mica powder in till it's all mixed in. Back and forth, left and right. Get down in that bottom groove. Scrape the side of it a little bit to get the excess off there. And this I'm not counting this 2 minutes and 12 seconds. I'm just getting it really incorporated. And there you can see it's pretty good. Now, since I'm frugal, I like to use my stir sticks at least 100 times. There's only 3 of them come in each box, you know. So I'll use the heat gun, and I'll heat the stir stick and put the epoxy in there. And then I'll use my little rag, wipe it off. I can use that again. And because I stirred that, now I want to use the heat gun and pop any air bubbles when I put this back in here. I'll do this twice. And when it goes in the jar, you'll see it. Ooh, that's getting hot, getting hot. Now, one of the things, you don't want to get it hot enough that you get a lot of smoke coming off the epoxy. It's not really a good idea to breathe that. And really, you probably should be using nitrate gloves. Yeah, yeah. I'm not that cheap. Yeah. But what I do is when I'm done like that, drip a few more. And then I'll take this and set it on the, like that, and that'll run in there. And after I've done that 50 or 100 times, there's about this much epoxy in the bottom of the yogurt cup. So what I'll do then is I'll cut the sides off of that about 4 or 5 times and peel that plastic off of that epoxy. Then I'll go over to the bandsaw and I'll cut it in 4th or 3rds or something like that. And then I'll put that in another batch of epoxy, maybe clear epoxy, and then that will be used over again. So a lot of times I like to use the whole bottle, and I'm going to show you how to cut the top off. But since I'm here tonight and I'm going to be going back to Austin, I'm going to pour this in this little Dr. Joints Advanced. So some lady gave that to us. Let you guys get a set of these for your wife, so when Grandma says use a pinch, you know what a pinch is. So there again, I've got air bubbles in there. So I use the heat gun and just lightly pop those bubbles as it goes in. Yeah. You can mix up any amount that you want. You could actually mix half the bottle of each kind, you know, part A and part B. And then put more mica powder in there and mix it up that way. And there again, this, after it drips off, that gold mica powder will settle back in the bottom. Now, one of the things that I normally do is I don't like to pour it just this way unless I'm going to put something in top of it, like those rounds. I like to set it on an angle so that when I make the spin tops, it'll show a lot of different colors. Now I'll pass this one around. This is one that's full and it's ready to slice up. And you can see all the different colors. Now that's one way. Another way is you can turn them on a side. I might not have one here. You can, next time, I'll mark this right here with a Sharpie, and then next time I might turn it 45 degrees or half or something like that, so that you'll get all those different shapes in there. So pass that around. I might need that one back in a little bit. Any questions on how to get that? Now when I slice these, because of slicing them straight off, and I'll show you how to do that in a little bit, then you get all those different colors in your spin tops. And kids love them. So does Grandma and Grandpa's. So let me see. I'll just set that over there. No. Of course, like he's saying, you never slice a round on a bandsaw. Why is that, you ask? A piece on a bandsaw, and I don't use a bandsaw. No. If you push this in a bandsaw, it can roll, and it can roll your fingers in it and cut your fingers off or pinch the dickens out of your fingers. Okay. Any questions on this right now? That's pretty straightforward if anybody's been mixing epoxy. But read the instructions. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take and show you how to cut the plastic off. So I need to move this here. And on those ones with the rounds, you can do the same thing. You can pour the epoxy in there and then put the rounds in and put it on the side. That way you'll get different colors, plus you'll get the rounds. So I was talking about, yeah, I'll just toss it out. So here's one that I made with the colored rounds, and this one has sparkles in it. Where are we at? Oh, you're in my way. yeah. Talk about him in a way. This one is where I cut those little squares out and put in here, and then it has sparkles in it. You can get to sparkle mica powder also. And one of the things, when you get the bottles empty, you need to wash them out. Wash them, whatever. Wash. Really good with acetone. Put about that much and shake it up. Maybe wipe the outside off. Get the bottle cleaned out inside. So when you cut this top off, you don't get the epoxy all over you. But I'm going to ahead and put wax paper down. And I had DB get me my own box of wax paper. Now here I'm using 2 chucks, and I'm going to turn the top off. Now you notice there's a Tolly tailstock adapter over here. I designed these and made them, and nobody wanted to make them and give me credit. So I ended up finally giving the drawings to One Way. They said, thank you very much, we'll make them, we'll sell them, we won't give you any credit. So I used to have a guy that made those for me of the different sizes. Unfortunately, he passed away. Now, you are a advocate for Easy Wood Tools. This is a negative rake, large detail tool. When I get the top cut off, I will show you how I slice these. This is the best tool to use if you use a regular pointed, what do you call it, pointed scraper. It will chip the epoxy like crazy. It looks like a chainsaw went through it. But with this, it don't do that. And I don't quite understand why. So, and one of the things, if he cleaned this out really good, it don't need to have really fast. I get right next to the top. Can you see that at the top? Okay. That's it. Got to get used to this thing here. So here's the jar that I now, because if it is your first 2 jars, you've got to do something with epoxy before you get empty jars. But now that I have empty jars, then I can go and continue. And if they're wonky, make your own or get it like this. So now this is where, now the next thing is to cut the epoxy itself. Now you guys and ladies that's turned epoxy, you know how messy it can be, right? Wrong one. Oh, here's a trick. You guys got a machinist in your club? You don't need a machinist. How many's got stronghold and Talon chucks? Nobody? Okay. How frustrating is it for the plastic end caps to fall off and the crossbar slide out and you have to pick it up? These are actually brass acorn nuts. You get them from McMaster. Don't go to Ace Hardware because they're brass coated steel. And what you do is you put this in your #1 jaws and use a file and file it a little bit and tap it for 5/16 threads per inch, and then you can screw the brass nut right on there. And they're never coming out. So I've done all of those for mine and his and some other people's chucks. So now to get this cleaned off, the same thing. You notice I just barely put this in, and all I'm going to do here is score the plastic. Now, my utility knife, I didn't mention it, but I try to line up this jaw right here with this jaw. So then I use a utility knife and off comes the plastic. Now this one, you see how the bottom comes off that way? This one, you notice that I poured the epoxy and mica powder in straight. Now, the reason I'm doing this is I can make 2 yellow, 2 blue, 2 orange, 2 darker blue, 2 green, and probably 2.5 purple. So when I cut these, at the very bottom, because this is concave right here from the plastic, a lot of times I'll take a piece of that plastic, the bottle, and put on there. And then, yeah. So if I need to, I'll take a piece of this and put on there, and I'll pour more plastic in here so that I can use that one over again. Yeah, more epoxy. Thank you. So now to cut this, and never leave your chuck key in your chuck and walk away. Somebody will come over and start the lathe or something like that, and could get hurt bad. That's all the same density, if you will. Oh, when you're pouring it, yeah. When I put them on an angle, even like this, you don't have to, but on this one I poured the purple in because I had mixed up something for another project and I had extra. Instead of dumping it or wasting it, I just poured it in here. And whatever the next project was green and blue, it was to fill cracks in a bowl, I'm assuming. And that way I can do it this way. Yes, but you don't have to, because if you mix up purple and then it's not set up, you pour green in there to kind of mix it up. And you can take a skewer or a stick and swirl it and give swirls. There's so many different colors and way you can mix it. If you want to let it set up completely, now I would recommend not leaving it for 2 or 3 weeks in a dusty environment. If dust gets in there, you're not going to have a good adhesion from one color to the next. And even on the ones that's on an angle, there I'll pour one in the morning, one at noon, and one in the afternoon, if I'm doing that. So I had a lady that wanted some nice mesquite bowls that had cracks in them. In Japan, they fill them with gold. There's a particular name for that. I wish I could remember the name. And I used that gold mica powder and the bow ties. They loved them. And I got a fair premium for them, too. So now on the other ones that not like this, I use my dividers and I will mark. I'll do this one right here. I won't do the yellow one right now. And I'll mark where the center is. That's just to give me an idea. Now, like I say, on most of them like this, I wouldn't do that. But if they're on an angle, and this is set probably close to a 1/2 inch, maybe a little bit bigger, and I use that and just score it a little bit. Now, I'm not sure how this is going to work. I'm going to turn this vacuum on. Let me talk a little bit about this. This cyclone is great because when you're turning epoxy, and especially when you're sanding it, it plugs up that vacuum filter like crazy. With this, it actually sucks the epoxy away really well. At home, I usually put my hose right here because this is coming down. I'm going to try this tonight to see if this will pick this up a little better. But it's going to be noisy. Yeah. Mullet. It is a... Oh, you got it. Oh, hand me one. Now, I'll talk about this. This guy, DJ Bell, lives just west of Dripping Springs, young guy. And this is the brochure. And on the back page, it has his email if you're interested. He also has a bench mount. Let's see, where's that at? Right here. That if you're sanding or carving or anything like that, it sucks that fine dust away. Now normally I wear a full face shield, but I don't think I'm going to get away with that. I'll talk about that. But if you're interested in one of these, he has it where you can set it up, excuse me, for all different types of vacuums. And of course it also comes with this other piece right here so that you can change it, and it's got the name on it right here, Mullet. And he's got if you look on YouTube, he has some videos on there right now. And for what I'm doing, this is technically for me a lifesaver. So I'm going to try this and see if I can use the vacuum to pull this dust away. I may not have to do that. You want to see what, and because these are clear right there, and I'm using the epoxy, it will wrap up sometimes around the bolt inside here, and you can see it. So I just take it off, turn it around, and it usually sucks the stuff right back out. It's neat to watch it work. Let's see how this noisy. Tell me if it's too noisy. Pretty loud, isn't it? Is that going to be too bad? Let's see what happens if I don't. Now, what I'm holding is the tool next to my body so I have good control over it. And it's slightly below center. I don't know if you can see it really good from the top, but I'm just cutting straight in. Now, I don't want to cut at an angle because I want these discs to be straight in there. So we'll do a couple. See what it does without. Oh. Now, out here on the far end, I'm a little more cautious because all this can move a little bit. And I go into where the tool's about halfway. I don't go beyond that. You don't want to cut all the way through for obvious reasons because it can catch and grab. Now, this is what I call a Stacy Hager parting tool. Unfortunately, Stacy passed away last year. But he made these out of the old hacksaws. It's a hacksaw blade. And it works really good, but still, again, never cut all the way through. Yeah. I is for on. So we'll see how this works. Normally I have my light so I can see how far I'm cutting in. And there, normally the vacuum is pulling the dust away. That's about 5/8 to 3/4 of an inch. Now I'm holding my hand next to the tool rest, but never put your hand beyond the tool rest. And that's kind of giving me some guidance there. Now the next thing is to cut it all the way through. To do that, move your tool rest completely out of the way, back your tailstock off. Because I'm using a back saw. And with the chuck on there, if I don't have that chuck on there, that piece is going to roll underneath the workbench and get all covered up, and you can't find some of them. There you can see, if I had this locked in, it might pinch and bind. Now I move that thing away. Let me talk to you a little bit about one-way stronghold chuck. If you have a real old stronghold chuck, this one right here, it might have 55 or it might have 59 scroll gears inside. And the chuck key might have 11 or it might have 12 teeth on it. So if you have an old stronghold chuck, one of the earlier ones, and you buy a new one, the chuck key will not work on the old one. Have any of you experienced that? It's only when you have like 5 or 6 chucks that you have to worry about it. Now we had that problem because I don't know if he bought a new one or I did, and we was having trouble. So I took the whole chuck apart, which you need to do periodically. And I called One Way, Kevin and Shane, and they said, "Oh yeah, we used to make them in-house, but it's cheaper to make them somewhere else, and we can't guarantee that the scroll and the chuck key is the same." I says, "That stinks." I don't know if they're too happy with me, but I said that. Oh, I love One Way. Yeah. So what we did was, I don't remember, we put 255s in his chuck and I had 259s or vice versa. Okay. So now what I normally do, I have a little bucket. I'll go to Ace Hardware and I cut all these and then I put them in a bucket. You know, that's that production mode type stuff. Because every time you stop and change over, time is money and money is time. So by doing all of these at once, then when I have all of them cut up, then the next step is drilling them. So I'm going to pretend that this is a full bucket. It's not. I'm sorry?
You said large. Your bucket said large.
Oh, I actually went to Ace Hardware, but those buckets were 3-gallon buckets. So I just grabbed this one and brought it tonight. Oh. Do you want me to pass that around? A couple more examples I'm going to pass around. This was some of those squares with translucent red and mica powder. And this one was some of Eugene Soto's square pen blanks that had swirls in. So I kept all the little stuff in a quart jar. You know, I'm frugal. That's cheap. So I put those in and then poured clear mica powder with the sparkles in around those. There. So now, the next step on all of them was to put them in here and drill them. So it's nice to have a bench or something close by. Hey! So now to drill these, I use a 7/16 drill bit. And if it's a solid color, that's wobbling a little bit. But it won't matter. So I keep this. Yeah, yeah. There's a reason to keep these. What's that reason? Other than I'm frugal. Pass that around. Then you can come back. So, the kids really like this. So, I take a bunch of those shavings, SWAF, I think it's called SWAF if you're a machinist, SWAF. But the shavings, and I'll mix them with clear epoxy, put them in a bottle, and then when I slice those and polish them, it's got all those fancy colors in there. And I'm not wasting it. Because it's kind of, well, you could say it's expensive, but it's not. Okay. Yeah. When I cut these, that's getting a little stiff. When I cut these, I'll pass these around. Normally it's a little thicker than this, but one side is kind of flat and the other side is more tapered. So I'll put the flat side in, just hold my thumb next to it, tighten it down so they're pretty straight next to it. Yeah, and now if you don't use the EMT tube on it and they're wonky, then you turn more away. You can still use the flat side and drill them that way. Okay? Now, see if I can get this one off. The problem with a long drill bit, especially in wood, it'll start walking. Now these are, I don't know if I'll pass this around because I'm not going to drill anymore. This is a machinist stubby 7/16 drill bit. You can get those from MasterCar and a lot of places that actually sell drill bits. And the reason I get a short drill bit is because it's not going to wobble on me. I have 3/8, 5/16, 3/8, 7/16 half. I've ordered a whole set of them. And I use 7/16 for this, and then I use 3/8 for some of my other stuff. And yeah, one of the things when you're drilling, you want to back your drill bit out quite often.
Like he says, he'll do 8 or 10 or 12 of these, each step.
Yeah, I'll have a 3-gallon bucket, and I've got 3 5-gallon buckets of spin tops ready to rough turn and turn. I just wanted to see what this one looked like. Then I'll move to the next item. Oh, wrong. Here it is. When you're way out here, there's a little bit more movement than when you get closer. When you get closer, there's not hardly any shadow mark. Now, for some reason, this didn't quite set up, but there you can see it was one of the earlier ones where I didn't have the jars empty, and I mixed up different colors of epoxy for some kind of project. Maybe I didn't get this one hard enough, but it's only in the corner. And I don't know why the corner didn't set up, but I'll work on that some other time. And I guess one of the things that you have to be careful with is not glue your stuff together. That can happen. There it goes. There it goes. Yeah, all lathes are a little bit different until you get used to them. Yeah. Now I've turned on this for a couple years, I guess. So I'll drill all of them, and now to glue them together, let's see. That's not fastening right. Let's see, I probably can glue it up here with a piece of plastic. I don't want to get epoxy on your fancy lathe. Now, these are the 7/16 dowels that I get from Lowe's. For some reason, Home Depot, they don't carry poplar. They carry oak and pine. I don't like oak and pine. So what I've made is this little block, and I drilled a 1/2-inch hole in it to a predetermined depth that I don't remember what it was. And then I use a water, and I have this little cup that I put water in. And like I say, I'll be doing a whole bucket of them at the same time. And I have a little brush that I put the water in. So let me get this first. Water makes Gorilla Glue set up. You know that, right? And I use this little yogurt cup to put that in. I don't need that one. So what I do is take some water and I put inside of the hole. And then I'll take some sandpaper and just scuff that up a little bit. And I'll put, I'm not going to put anything unless that comes out of there. There's a little metal pin that goes in there. Now I'll just put a little bead of Gorilla Glue around, and then I'll put it in here. And I like to get up close to my work. If you have a regular handle, a hammer, you're going to be holding it up here like that. But with this, I can actually tap that in. And once it hits the bottom, it's where it needs to be. Then I'll take all of these and toss in another bucket. And I'll do like the 3-gallon or 5-gallon of them all at the same time. So I'm only going to do one. Any questions on that? Yeah, I'll put it in here with my cell phone and glue it to my cell phone. Yeah, you don't want to touch this. I'm saying that's 3/4 of an inch. And of course, this was the very first one, so it's got this ridge around it right here. So it'll turn down. So you can make that any depth you want. Reason I put them in a bucket, the Gorilla Glue will actually kind of squish out a little bit and run down the side of it. Sometimes I have 2 or 3 of them that will be glued together. Fine. And I'm frugal. You know, that's cheap. I pour the water back in the bottle. And you know why that is? I don't have water or bathroom in my studio. The water is what makes the Gorilla Glue expand and set up. I put it inside of the epoxy, or in the spin top part. So that's a good little hammer. All right, now to turn those, I do 2 steps. Wish I had one that didn't have that. I found this in Provo, Utah, Craft Supply. Maybe I need to take it out. It has a really, really fine needle point. Most of them are pretty blunt. And see that? Right there. A Craft Supplies, Provo, Utah. Red handle. Ah, I can lose things in front of me. Now what I normally do is I take this and put it as far back as I can, about maybe 3/8 to a 1/2 inch away. Because if this thing's sticking out like this, see how it wobbles? So when I stick this back in here, and then bring this up. Yeah, we don't. Yeah, with that on there, it's wobbling a little bit. Yeah, something's not quite true right here. But when you turn it, it'll be round anyway. Now, the tool that was donated is a number 100, unhandled. Now, I like the Hunter 7-inch handles for it because I can lay it on there and it's not going to roll off and hit the floor. Yeah, that's the Thompson. It's a Hunter number 1 tool and a Thompson handle. I made this one a few years ago and it works great, but it has a tendency to roll off sometimes. And guess what hits the floor first? The cutter. And if this carbide cutter hits the concrete floor, it shatters. I always bring a backup. So let's see. Now this is where it's good to have your vacuum going also. And this is just to rough it. This one's been roughed before. And then I take a little bit off right here. Do I have any? Now once I get it, and then I'll toss it in a bucket. And next thing will be to extend it out to where you got about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch on it. Put this back in the same hole, tighten it down. And now I can yeah, something's wobbling pretty good. But this is only a demo piece. Now, this I got from Todd Raines at SWAT. It's a, I guess you could call it a 1/2 inch rounded skew. I use it to kind of bring this end down just a little bit. And normally they don't bounce like this, so. And then I have my little detail gouge. And I'll bring the point down a little bit more. And I'll come to the back and I'll inset it a little bit. That's still wobbling a little bit. Now the sand knees, I use Abernet. And there's some of them on the table over there that's been donated by Vincent Welch. And this is where this thing comes in really handy. This is 80 grit to 400 grit. And I could sand a little bit more on that, but that works pretty good. Now, I've got some abrasive paste here. And let's see. If anybody's interested, this is from Coyote Workshop. Cortland Hunt makes this stuff, and this is what I use to polish this up. And there's some abrasive paste and sanding wax. So after I go through that, then I turn this on. And this is what really makes it shine. And then I turn it up, polish it in, and never use a rag, and then don't wrap your fingers around it. How many of you have done that before? Yeah. Because normally I'll only use a little piece of cloth or paper towel, this like right here. And you know, I never wrap my finger around it. Oh. And then I'll take a tissue. You get these in a box of rags. They call them box of cloths. And if this catches, I never wrap my hand around it. That wipes off the excess. And then I use the Coyote polishing cream with just a little piece of cloth. This helps prevent dust from attaching to it. Attracted to it, I guess I should say. I really like this stuff. I use that on my bowls too. And then I polish that off, get any excess off. It's Coyote Polish and Wax. Cortland Hunt from Hutto, Texas. Now what? Oh, this is a Doug Thompson skew. I don't need a handle on it, and I use this to trim that down. Now, one of the things that you need to do, and this is very important, make something like this to go over the edge. This might not work. And then the CA glue and accelerator. I got it here. I'm going to try to protect this lathe. At home on my Vitmar VO100, it just sets right up next to it like that. So I want to put a little bit of CA glue, cyoacrylate, is that how you say it? Let it soak in, and then you spray it with the accelerator. Invariably, if I don't do this, and I don't understand why, that CA glue will come here and it'll go right next to the spin top. Almost every time. Then you got to go back and turn it a little bit and re-sand this surface right here. What does CA glue do to wood? Makes it hard. And you'll want that point to be really hard, because when kids spin it and stuff like that, you want it to hold up. So then I use the Thompson tool. And now, this is something you don't want to have long sleeves, long hair, or stuff like that. I put my hand around here just to support it a little bit. Turn this off to a point. Okay? Then I come back up here and I'll turn this off. Like I say, then I'll put all these in a bucket. I might have glued that on. I got about 4 or 5 buckets. The glue might not have been completely set up there. Yeah, right on the point. That is a very important point. No pun intended. When you go to the catalog, the Woodturners catalog, it shows you the point, but there's no number for it. So when you order, you've got to go and ask the lady, go to the catalog, page 146 or whatever it was, item B. I want that. Oh, well, don't show a price on it. I said, well, how can I get that item? So she calls in a supervisor. Oh, yeah, we misprinted the catalog. This is what it is, and they'll send it to you. So, I'm sorry? Well, after you buy the whole thing, there's different tips that you can put on it. There's a screw in there that you could take that tip off and put other tips in. You can buy the whole thing, but I didn't want the whole thing. I just wanted that tip. Yeah, but you got to have the rest of the tailstock adapter for the tip. Yeah. So after I have a bucket of these, somebody in my house that knows where I sleep said, this looks terrible. Well, yeah, it does. So then I use one of Vincent Welch's sanding mandrels in a drill chuck, and then I will sand the top of it. Just makes it look pretty. All right, so now I'm going to pass these around. Then I'm going to go to how much time we got? Are we good? This is some of the unusual things that you can get when you turn spin tops. Where, this one or that one? Oh, this is, yeah, overhead. This is a very special spin top for a sweetheart in my life. Now, how did that happen? So when you pour this epoxy in a bottle, it has a little dimple in it. And I just happened to turn it enough, and I didn't see it until I stopped, because this was a little bit of red, and then I poured the sparkle white on top of it. So it came out with Valentine's in the top of it. So this is my wife's. I expect it to come back. So I'll pass these around so you can just look at them. And that's how that happened. Okay? Now, yeah. Now, I'm going to show these. You can't say anything. Who can guess what these spin tops are made with? No. No. Anybody want to guess? No. Huh? No. Chopsticks. Chopsticks. Bamboo chopsticks. Bamboo chopsticks. You know, you go to the Panda Express and use a chopstick. I use a fork because I can't get enough off a chopstick. But these are bamboo chopsticks. This one is from Panda Express. The oval ones are from a Chinese place, Marble Falls. So if you donate a little bit of cash, the manager will give you a bundle of Panda Express chopsticks. A widow lady that we both know, she knows the people in Marble Falls, and she talked them out of a bundle of their chopsticks, and they're over. The trouble is with these, they come together. You got to break them apart, but some people leave them together and use them that way. So when you break them apart, then I have the chuck, each one up in my little bulldog chuck, and turn that broken edge down to where it's kind of round. So pass these around. Now, so this is the Panda Express chopsticks. Now I found out The best way is after you get the bottle cleaned out and cut the top off, it took 52 pair or 104 individual chopsticks to fill up the not this one, the other one, Alumilite. This one here I think took 98 individual chopsticks. The trick is you mix up your epoxy with whatever color you want, pour it in the bottle, take these out and put them in a tub like this or something, and then you have the option of putting the point down or the top down. So once you pour the epoxy in there, and that's where I fill the jar up, wherever it went, the little cup right up to the top, 2 ounces, because I found out that with part A and part B at 2 ounces and pour that in here, then when I put the chopsticks in, it forces the epoxy up around all of the chopsticks. If you try to pour the epoxy in from the top, you get nothing but air bubbles down here. And normally I don't even put this in a pressure pot. So what am I going to do with this top right here?
It won't pour anymore.
No. So remember, I'm frugal, I'm cheap. I take one of the jars, put it around here, and use blue painter's tape. And I'll tape around here and tape up the seam, and I'll put about 3 layers on here, mix up some other color, and then pour it in, and then that will fill from right here to the top, and maybe leave a little extra, because you need to mix up extra so that it completely fills that up. Otherwise I'm going to waste these. So this is Panda Express chopsticks. So it's just another way of saving the rest of those chopsticks. Wow. Let's say a lot of times I'll pour a little epoxy in the bottom, since it divoted like that, so that all these are setting flat. And they will have a tendency, if you don't have enough of them in there, they'll try to float. So I use a piece of micarta. You know what micarta is? And then I'll put a chuck on top of it. And they don't float no more. That holds them down. And then after it sets up, then is when I glue or tape this on there, and then I fill it on up. And then all of it is cut this off, and I'll use that piece until, you know, continue doing it. So that's another thing. Now, and normally I'll only put like a 1/4 inch in. Is that your question? Oh yeah, you mix up your epoxy and put it in the jar. Then you start putting your chopsticks in. And when you do that, it causes the epoxy to come up around the chopsticks. If you try to do it the other way, you get all kind of air bubbles. And I have taken and put them in the pressure pot sometimes, which I haven't seen any difference if I do it that way. If you do it the other way, you'd probably still have air bubbles in it. Okay, so from that, I went to making pressure. Pressure pot compresses the air bubbles. If you have punky wood and you use cactus juice, which is a whole different animal, the vacuum pulls the air out of punky wood, and then when you release the vacuum, it lets the cactus juice go into the wood. I don't use a vacuum for doing epoxy. You probably could, but I just don't. So then I thought, okay, what if I made some Christmas ornaments with the chopsticks? So I set my other pair of dividers wider, and I guess I can use this one. I'm going to try some of these, and then I cut about this wide, more or less. I mean, you can do it. Back up, back up, back up. So there, I don't know, you can see the dividers, and that's where I start. And then with that, I will slice them just like I did for the spin tops, but I'll leave a tenon on right here. That way I can hold them with my other little bulldog chuck, and then I hollow them out through a 1/2 inch hole right here. And I use the hunter tools again. I use the number 1 and then I use the number 1 shoulder tool, and then I finally finish up with the number 1 back tool. So I demonstrated this a few years ago with making regular Christmas ornaments. You can only go in with the number 1 so far. And then what you have to use is the shoulder tool to come in right here and get this cut right here. Clean that up. And then after that, I may, depend on how far it is, come in from the very back and go right to the corner. And then I use the back tool to go from that corner around. And I use the Tolly gauges. Somebody asked about the Tolly gauges. Who was that? I make Tolly gauges to gauge the front. But I use the double end bow tie calipers to measure the back. And can you see how? Okay, this is inside, but right there is how thin or thick that is. That's less than 1/8 of an inch thick. No, I do them almost all that way. The bamboo chopsticks are really quite durable, and they hold up better than I thought. Some of the started ones, I left them a little bit thicker, and then I started going thinner and thinner, and found out I can do them about 1/8 of an inch thick. So I passed these around. So once I did that, I go, what am I going to make the icicle and finial with? Guess what the icicle and finial is made with? More bamboo, skewers. So, pass this one around. So to do the skewers, so I started out putting these in a bucket, and they like to do this bit. They don't stay standing up. They like to roll around. So what I did was I took the lid and I drilled 3/4 inch holes in it. And I had 5 holes in there, but only need 3 or 4. That way, when I put this in there, it holds them up. And then this is what it looks like before I pour the epoxy in. And I found out that I pour about epoxy about this much in here. You know, it's one of those things you got to guesstimate, and I mark the cups when I start doing this. And then when I put the skewers down in, there again, it forces the epoxy up around the skewers. So it fills it completely up like this. And normally I'll try to turn them until they kind of go straight up and down. Then I'll take this to the bandsaw and very carefully cut this right off. So once I get those, oh, this is a plastic test tube. DB, where did you order them? Amazon. Shooter tubes, out of my area expertise. But that holds them up to fill them up. And then, after I get that, then I'll hold them in my little chuck, and I'll turn this all down, and that little chuck or tailstock adapter is going around. It's what I hold this. And this here I turn to 5/8 of an inch, roughly about 3/4 inch long. That way I can hold it here, and then I can turn. Okay, so I turn this there. This is 5/8 because my little bulldog chuck, the max it'll go is a little more than 5/8. Okay, and then by holding this, I have my fiber combi golden mean little ruler that I'll lay this out. It just happens that I kind of like this design for my icicles and then the top finial. And then I'll turn those and sand them. Sometimes I put a little thin CA glue on here, let it soak in and accelerate it to stiffen this up. There's one of the colors popped out up here. I can't do much with that except put CA glue on it. And these are great for Christmas gifts, and they're light because they're all hollow inside. Yeah. And this is a red one. Okay. So you use any color, but I like to use brighter colors. You don't want to use green or brown because when you put it on a Christmas tree, it blends in. Where the reds, the blues, the purples, those kind of colors show up a whole lot better on Christmas trees. Whatever color mica powder you want to use is fine. So from that, this, here's one that's still in a test tube. You see where I cut the top of it off? And sometimes when I cut a top off, I'll put real thin CA glue on there if there's a little divot. You want to pass that around, you're good to go. Oh, that's a good question. So what I do is when I'm on the bandsaw, I'll cut that little rounded tip off. And then I'll chuck this up in my one-way Talon chuck as far as I can, where it hits like that. And I'll turn this down and I'll turn this to 5/8 of an inch, which fits my little chuck. Then I'll turn it around and hold it right here and then bring up that little life center and then turn this plastic away. And I'm there again, I'm using the negative rake square cutter, which works a lot better on both the epoxy. And yeah, it's a radius square. Yeah, you could probably use either one. So let's see if I can get this out of here. So this, right there. Whoop. This here is for your door prize. And I sell these for $30. And right place, you could probably sell them for $100. Watch him, Daddy. Don't hide it. Yeah. So then I had this idea, and I asked somebody not to glue the top in because I wanted to show you the little mag light. So this, where's the light switch in here? Makes a great night light, and you can actually see from the icicle part. You can turn it back on. So I threw somebody under the bus because he didn't listen. I had an appointment to go to. So they had it again. So it's got a little, you can tell how you make these.
Put the wire into the copper tube before you bend the copper tube. And then there's a battery pack, a AA battery pack underneath with a little miniature switch.
And where do you get all that stuff?
Amazon.
Copper tube also?
No, copper tube comes from Home Depot.
So bend, or you put the wire in first.
Well, first I start with a little mini mag. I ordered from Amazon because you can't get the mini mag light bulb anywhere else. And I filed the two little leads a little bit with a file, and then I soldered the wire onto the leads with shrink wrap, and shrink wrap the wire, and then I drill the hole in the hook before I bend it.
And deburr it.
What?
And you deburr that?
Yeah. I use what is it, a little drill bit or a center point to drill the hole in the hook before I bend the rest of it.
He didn't deburr this up here. So it makes a really nice nightlife. Say that 3 times fast. Nice nightlife. Yeah. And of course, this is mesquite here. You've used cherry, mesquite, whatever you can find. There's some up there, Jim.
I was looking at that.
So I hope that I've given you some ideas. Spin tops are great for kids of all ages, and I guess they're back there. Not anymore. They're in pockets. They went home already. They're a lot of fun, and I think I've about saturated the market in Dripping Springs and Wimberley and where else? Beautifest. But I still got like 3 5-gallon buckets that's ready to finish, and it's fun making them as much as it is turning them. And it's great. And now I'm making Christmas ornaments, and they go really, really good. We've had a couple ladies from Virginia that came over and bought 12. That's, that's some money in the pocket. Yeah, the jar that Marcia's got back there was a drill shavings. Now, if I'm drilling out the epoxy with chopsticks in it or some other stuff, I only save the solid colors, because with the chopsticks in the epoxy, it kind of makes it look muddy, if you will. And some people may like that. That's why I keep those solid colors, and when I'm turning the ones that's on an angle, because they're solid colors, I keep all of those, because even though it's on an angle, you still have the solid colors that you go in clear epoxy, and it really looks pretty. Any questions? I think I beat it to death. Well, thanks for having us down once again.